What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Scott and welcome back to FudgeMuppet. This week I am pumped to bring you a very special, very unique build, one I know many of you have been waiting a long time for. This is an ambitious build, but we think it's paid off and you guys are going to love it. This is the Synth. The Synth is a revolutionary advancement of Institute technology designed for greatness in secret by their leader. The Synth was programmed to be the intelligent, charismatic heir to the Institute, bound to carry them to new heights of success and accomplishment. The Synth is a prototype for the fourth generation of synthetic humanoid and demonstrates the incredible feats of the Institute's greatest minds. The Synth is not only a diplomat and a genius, but he is also a super soldier, designed to be an unfaltering master of combat, free from the dangers of mortal misjudgment. This build boasts high levels in a variety of stats and is therefore a perfect choice for any player who wants to be competent in as many facets of the game as possible. As always, timestamps to each section of the video can be found in the description, but right now, let's delve into the Synth's backstory. The Synth obtained his identity from a man named Nate. Nate was a typical youth from the suburbs of Boston. He was likable and friendly in nature and had no trouble developing platonic friendships and attracting girls. His natural charisma and intelligence made him the kind of person his peers wanted to be around. He was contemplative and introspective, and his natural curiosity gave him a profound interest in science. He was fascinated by the human condition and the notion of existentialism. He wasn't religious and instead chose to embrace the idea that death had no divine significance. This realization played on his mind, and Nate wondered if it would ever be possible for human beings to discover immortality. Would great minds always be subject to decay, or was it possible for someone to create an alternative? This concept would inevitably be passed on to his offspring and would affect him more than he could possibly imagine in the future. Nate enlisted in the United States Armed Forces and served during the Sino-American War in the 2nd Battalion, 108th Infantry Regiment. He served a term on the front lines before retiring back to Boston. Despite his military involvement, Nate still had a passion for science. He spent a lot of time at the Commonwealth Institute of Technology giving guest lectures. He eventually met a post-grad law student who had transferred from the Suffolk County School of Law. They fell in love and settled into the suburb of Sanctuary Hills. It was your standard Fallout backstory for Nate until the peculiar occurrences that were going to take place in Vault 111. On October 23, 2077, nuclear war broke out and Nate, Nora, and Sean hurried into the vault. An anxious couple and their infant child entered the vault tech cryo chambers, and Nate watched as his consciousness faded into a frozen inertia, his last sight being his beautiful wife and child. Nate's stagnation was interrupted by the arrival of an Institute scientist and the grizzled man with the six-shooter. The sub-zero temperatures designed to preserve Nate were incapable of numbing the suffering as he watched his wife die at the hands of the murderous stranger. His pain was cut short and the cryo chamber pulled him away from reality once again. While Nate's mind was occupied by oblivion, sometime in the 60-year stasis, his body was replaced by the Institute with a carbon copy synth duplicate. This is the turning point of Nate's story. The regular man no longer exists, and in his place is the Synth. The Synth is the prototype for the Institute's fourth generation of synth, designed in the same vein as Generation 3's, but with enough free will to be tasked with discovering the Institute of his own volition. The Wasteland will test the Synth. As he learns new skills, new perk upgrades will subsequently be activated. Despite seemingly being a pawn of the Institute, the Synth will not be limited to a linear path directly from the vault to the Institute. That would detract from his ability to discover and grow in a way only a Gen 4 can. Father programmed the Synth in secret with the intention of allowing him to acquire the necessary knowledge to one day lead the Institute without having to rely so heavily on them. The goal is that he'll be able to fend for himself like a human while having all the benefits of a synth. The defining factor that separates Gen 4 synths from Gen 3 is adaptability. For that reason, it is totally plausible for the Synth to briefly serve other factions. He may join the Brotherhood to study their combat prowess. He may even help the Minutemen in hopes of discovering as much of the post-war wasteland as possible, examining the living conditions and requirements of above-ground settlers. Despite being a creation of the Institute, the Synth has been specifically designed to replicate a human's free will. He will inevitably join the Institute and will do nothing prior that may harm them, but until that point, he will be blissfully unaware of any external influences into his decision-making. The fundamental motivation of Father was his fight with cancer. He had realized that even the greatest greatest minds were thwarted by mortality. He knew that Nate would make a great leader, but in order to protect him from the weakness of man, replacing him with an identical synth replica would ultimately benefit the longevity of Nate's reign. The synth maintains all of Nate's human qualities while obtaining the ability to upgrade and evolve, as well as avoid disease and aging. The synth is designed to take all of the best aspects from real and synthetic humans to form the most advanced being, the Gen 4 synth. Upon locating the Institute, the synth will feel eerily at home, still unaware of his condition. Meeting Father, the synth will begin to understand the reality of his existence. Conversation with Father will hint towards the nature of the synth's creation and release from cryostasis. Interactions such as, "I had no expectation you'd survive out here in all this," and "soon I hope you'll understand. Everything I've done has been for the future," suggest that the synth was a resounding success. In reaching the Institute without forceful assistance of a Corsair, the Gen 4 synth will prove to be everything Father had hoped for. In reaching the Institute and defeating the other factions, the synth will pass all of Father's tests. The synth resembles the future of the Commonwealth, the leader who will not be foiled by such frivolities as disease and old age. Nate's past obsession with existentialism will come to the forefront as the synth tackles living life as someone who is unaffected by natural decay. As it may be too late for Sean, he intended for their legacy to live on through the synth. The aim of the synth long term will be to restore ordered civilization to the Commonwealth using the ideologies of the Institute. If you want more information on how exactly a synth backstory and motives can work, check out a link in the description for a video that we did on this entire topic. So now that you know about the synth, let's have a look at his specs. The synth will be programmed with 1 strength, 1 perception, 4 endurance, 10 charisma, 10 intelligence, 1 agility, and 1 luck once he is activated and released from the vault. The special book in Sean's room will be used to enhance endurance. With the help of the special book and 4 perk point upgrades, the synth will have a very respectable amount of endurance. While Nate wasn't a particularly unique human in terms of his durability, his bionic replacement won't be susceptible to a great many of the weaknesses that would leave humans lying in a ditch. He will be immune to diseases and will never age. He will be constantly developing and evolving without ever having to worry about a plateau in potential. For this reason, the endurance stat is one in which the synth excels. The synth will also boast 10 points of base charisma. Father programmed him to be capable of finding his own path through the Commonwealth, and most importantly to one day take charge of the Institute and guide them into the future. Father knew that the responsibilities would require a skilled diplomat and a master negotiator. Therefore, the synth will be very well equipped in the arts of persuasion and leadership. Another area of expertise for the synth is intelligence. Intelligence is the paramount quality of the Institute. Achievement and growth can only be undertaken by great minds, by individuals who can innovate and improve on the foundations laid by their predecessors. As a result, this is the primary defining attribute of the synth. He is the consequence of the entirety of the Institute's ingenuity and is designed to take the organization to new heights. 10 points of base intelligence is to be expected from the first generation 4 synth. While the synth's agility will start at a measly 1 point, this revolutionary prototype is not a product of poor engineering. The synth will take some time mastering the potential of his bionic vessel, but once he does, he will be superior to the common human life form in terms of overall finesse and reflexes. This feat of biomechanical engineering surpasses mortals in regards to motor function and isn't prone to human errors and miscalculations. Finally, we have luck, and while luck begins as a lackluster stat, this will gradually improve over the synth's time in the wasteland. As the synth ventures through the wastes of Boston, his experience will pay dividends in the form of Institute upgrades. This will come in the form of some very intricate Institute technology, allowing the synth to install hardware and software updates remotely. But in the interest of time, we'll just refer to these upgrades as perks. From the perception stat line, the synth will undertake the Rifleman perk. It is expected that all synths come with combat effectiveness, and this was easy for the Institute considering his former military experience. With the Rifleman perk fully optimized, the synth will be very efficient with his laser rifle. Attacks with non-automatic rifles will do double damage and ignore 30% of target's armor. It will also grant him a 8% chance to cripple an opponent with each hit. As we mentioned previously, the synth will augment his endurance throughout his journey. Devoting 4 perk points to endurance will raise it from 4 to a much more impressive 8. While no specific perks in this stat line will be taken, the increased overall stat will vastly improve hit points as well as poison and radiation resistance. Not being a human has its benefits for surviving in the harsh post-war landscape. From Charisma, the synth will undertake the Lone Wanderer perk. The synth's loyalty, whether he knows it immediately or not, lies with the Institute. he will not be inclined to travel with the assistance of a companion prior to discovering them. The synth is being molded to lead a people, and relying heavily on others may be detrimental to do that. Therefore, with all 4 levels of the Lone Wanderer perk, the synth will have an increased carry weight of 100 pounds when traveling without a companion. He will also take 30% less damage across the board, deal 25% more damage, and will have 25 more action points to spend. Next up from intelligence comes medic. As a Generation 4 synth, the synth has been designed to maintain itself without a strong influence from the Institute's engineers. Therefore, some self-preservation skills are essential to prevent this living feat of scientific achievement from turning into a stain on the pavement. He may be immune to diseasing and aging, but enough firepower can destroy just about any piece of technology. With 2 perk points invested into medic, Stimpaks will restore 60% of lost health, while Radaway will remove 60% of radiation. Also from intelligence, we have Hacker. Synths may feel human, but they have a distinctive affinity to machines, and with 3 levels of the Hacker perk, the synth will be able to bypass any difficulty of terminal encryption. Lastly from this stat line is science. As a synth exposed to the opportunities of the Commonwealth, the synth isn't limited to the standard issue Institute arms. He will instead have access to a variety of weapons and will be able to implement his intellect in modifying them for optimum devastation. With the science perk maxed, the synth will have access to all ranks of high-tech mods. Similar to endurance, agility is a stat line which begins mediocre, but becomes crucial to the synth later on. We suggest allocating a total of 8 perk points into base agility, bringing it from a 1 to a 9. Combined with a bobblehead, the synth's agility will be no joke. Once his endurance reaches 5, the synth will be able to drop 3 perk points into the Action Boy perk. The combination of high AP and AP regeneration will ensure the synth is always making the first move. The last stat line is luck, as we talked about earlier. This too will be amended as you level up. Taking 5 points of luck will increase the recharge rate of the critical hit meter and open the door to some valuable perks, the first of which being Scrounger. Intuition may seem like a human trait, but this advanced synth has no trouble tracking down caches of valuable ammo. Maybe it's because machines aren't fooled by superstitions and old wives' tales, but the synth has no shortage of luck in the wasteland. With all levels of the Scrounger perk, more ammo will be found in containers, and there is also a chance that firing the last round of a clip will restore some ammo. Also from luck comes Bloody Mess. Bloodshed is a necessary art for the Institute's synth, and this Gen 4 synth sheds a fair share from his enemies. With 3 points dropped into Bloody Mess, the synth will inflict plus 15% damage in combat, and his kills will explode into a gory red paste. Finally, our last perk is Critical Banker. The synth's enhanced luck means that critical hit chances pop up far more frequently, and with this perk fully elevated, the synth can store up to 4 critical hits for later use. Not including gear, but including all the bobbleheads, the synth's special stats will be 2 strength, 2 perception, 10 endurance, 11 charisma, 11 intelligence, 10 agility, and 7 luck. As for gear, the synth's starting apparel will be basically whatever he likes, with whatever synth armor pieces he can find. He'll also hold on to the hazmat suit for situations involving intense radiation exposure. The final build, however, will be fully upgraded heavy synth armor pieces over standard road leathers. You can opt for the synth uniform in the place of those leathers if you so please, but we feel the road leathers provide a much more appealing aesthetic. As a synth, this build will focus on the use of energy weapons, specifically single-fire laser rifles, as they suit the synth's perk upgrade choices. During the early game, any laser or plasma rifles will do the trick, but the final setup will include a completely modified laser sniper rifle with a reflex sight instead of a scope for more combat versatility. Along with this, the synth will have an upgraded plasma thrower. It's important to note that the plasma thrower does in fact scale with the rifleman perk as opposed to heavy gunner, so this weapon will be a viable alternative to the laser rifle depending on the situation at hand. As we touched on earlier, the synth will not put his trust in non-institute affiliated companions. As a synth programmed to lead, he will generally not want to rely on any companion, but if you decide to take one, X688 is definitely the most suitable pick. Keep in mind, in doing so, you will lose the Lone Wanderer perk bonuses. The synth will not care much for settlement building. He has been tasked with taking the Institute to new heights, and spending time on surface settlements is not really a valuable use of his time. The Institute HQ will function as the synth's base of operations. He may, however, elect to help a Nuka World Raider faction take over settlements with the clandestine motive of keeping the wasteland above distracted with their own small-scale problems, rather than allowing them to narrow their focus onto the Institute as they rise to prominence. Well, there you have it, guys. guys, that concludes our latest Fallout 4 build, our first ever synth build. Coming up with a plausible yet interesting synth build took a lot of work, and if you've enjoyed it, feel free to show your support with a like and a share. It's your support and enthusiasm that allows us to keep bringing you the best quality builds on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe if you're new to the channel, and as always, social media links and timestamps can be found just below in the description. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I've been Scott, and I will see you later.